Darling, we've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind, where is the
Hello and welcome to Ideas Don't Bleed, a comics podcast presented by Ashcan Press and featuring Matthew Rosenberg and the Supple Boiz, Ethan S. Parker, and Griffin Sheridan. This is part 2 of our discussion with Christopher Sebela. We hope you enjoy.
I don't know how many people listen to this podcast at all, let alone how many people listen to it.
A couple million.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
We're going to read the numbers live on this episode.
We're going to read their names at the end of the episode. I sometimes go on that, there's a tangent, but whatever. I go on that Comic Book Club Live podcast, which is a very fun podcast that I like. And I seem to always go on it once a month. They read the names of all their patrons from Patreon. And it feels, they just do it. And I keep going on that episode where they do that. And I was like, do you guys do this every episode? And they were like, no, once a month. And I was like, I think I've been on it 3 times when you've done it. But it feels like a graduation, like you're at graduation and they're announcing everybody. And then they don't call your name and you don't get to graduate. Right. And that's what it feels like to me. There's like this weird tension of like, are they going to say my name? And then they're like, and that's it. And you're like, oh, I didn't get to graduate. We have a couple million subscribers, listeners, which is great. And I don't know how many of them, I don't know how many people who listen to the show listen just for the guests that they're fans of, or how many listen because they regularly listen. So I don't know who knows you, who's here. Like some people who are going to listen to this are fans of yours, and some people maybe don't. So I feel like you probably don't want to talk about it, but I feel like it's a disservice to people who don't know you not to discuss the Clown Motel.
Sure. No, I'm fine talking about it.
Okay. So the year is, I have no idea. What year was that?
2015.
The year is 2015. I didn't do any research for this. And you decide to go live in a clown-themed motel in the desert of Nevada for a month and chronicle it on Twitter.
Yeah.
And you raised money to do this. You raised money.
I kickstarted it.
You kickstarted.
It's my first Kickstarter ever.
Well, look at that. You kickstarted it. Was there, I don't remember, I think I gave to the Kickstarter and I still don't remember. Was there an end goal other than I'm going to do this? You were going to make the zine at the end of it.
I made a book.
You made the book at the end.
The zine wasn't even planned. I just said I would write a book about it. And I wrote a book about it.
So the tweets were just chronicling it at the time and sort of keeping your thoughts in order. And
it was just keeping myself sane.
And you were there for a month. And it sort of positioned you to this position of notoriety in comics because you were the dude who went and lived in the Clown Motel for a month. First of all, why?
So I had gotten mildly obsessed with it the year before, like right at the end of 2014. With my friend Sheena, who used to be my adventure buddy when I lived in Kansas City. So we started talking about it and we were like, we should go. So then we put together a trip. Like I drove to LA and I was there for a while. Then I drove over to Vegas, picked her up from the airport, and we stayed at the Circus that night. And then drove to Tonopah, Nevada the next day and spent the weekend at the Clown Motel. And then we left. Well, so I dropped Sheena off in Vegas, and then I'm like, I'm not taking that same highway past the Clown Motel because it's horrifying. Like once the sun goes down, there are no lights at all. Like, and that's the one condition of driving I don't like. So I was like, I'm gonna go on this highway. And long story short, I suddenly realized that I'm back on that same road. Like, and the sun is going down and I'm too far along. It was like right when I passed the prison that I was like, oh crap, I'm on the same highway and I can't turn around. So I just keep going. And by the time sun goes down, it's like, it's too dark. I can't go any further. So I have to check back into the Clown Motel. And then when I left, I started thinking about it more, and it just felt like that, me being forced to stay there one more night, and then me thinking about it more was just like, I have to go back. I don't know why, but like I want to go back. And then I was like, I'd love to do like a writer's retreat where I just go like stay in a motel room for, a couple weeks and just, no distractions at all. So that was the plan. And then I just like pitched it as like, hey, would anybody pay money for me to go live in the clown motel for a month? And unfortunately, a lot of people were super into it. I got funded in 4 hours, and I was asking for like $5,000. It's the fastest I've ever funded anything.
Mm-hmm.
So
how does that make you feel about everything in life?
I get it. Everybody wants to watch somebody else go through pain. And this seemed like an amusing sort of pain. So,
sure.
So yeah, I don't know why ultimately the writer's retreat was but also I remember I was having problems with a book of mine that I was working on, and they were going to change artists, and I was still pretty new in my career, and I was just like, I can't handle this. I was like, I just want to go to just be in the desert away from all this. So it was a lot of things that coalesced into me. Yeah, living in a clown motel.
If you could do it again, would you?
I might. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't the worst experience of my life. There were a lot of boring days and a lot of boring nights. I really had to wait around for things to happen. But then when they happened, they really happened. There was the first 2 weeks were solidly boring. And then week 3, that Friday, a gang of bikers shows up, 30, 40 bikers. And they're checking in, and they're laying their leathers out along the railings. Okay. I was like, oh, fuck. Okay. I don't know what's going to happen this weekend. And then, so when that calmed down, I was like, cool. And then I heard clown horns, and I look outside, and there's an Escalade with 4 clowns getting out of it, and they're checking in.
Okay.
And then my friend Terry had come down, and we were doing a seance because that was one of the stretch goals.
Sure.
And then also I got approached by a woman from Chinese television. I got approached by her cameraman. When we were hanging out by the cemetery, he's like, "Oh, are you the writer?" I was like, "What?" And he's like, "We've been looking for you." And they interviewed me by the cemetery for this Chinese news program about the clown motel.
Amazing.
So yeah, and then right after that weekend ended, Nevada had the biggest rainstorm it had had in 20 years. And the town got flooded, and we were all trapped there. And then there was a fire at a dump that had radioactive materials in it. So suddenly there was the risk of fallout. And all these people were trapped in town. So, very high highs, but the lows were crushingly low.
So, just so we're clear here, the high highs are the radioactive dumpster fire and the flood trapping you with bikers and clowns.
Yeah,
that was the high. Okay, I just wanted.
Great, yeah, that's what you do it for. Is
for sure.
So yeah, but I could never go home. I can't go back there because now it's super. I hate to use the phrase commercialized, but it's very much hey, we're a clown motel. Isn't that scary? And before it was just hey, we're a clown motel. Would you like to check in? And now it's ooh, and it's not this I don't want to stay in a place that knows that it's creepy.
Sure, yeah.
That has T-shirts.
Yeah, that has my zine hanging on the wall of their shop.
Ooh, look at that. Yeah.
Pretty prestigious.
I went to Brighton, England once, which is a beach town in England. It's there.
Of course, we're all
where the mods and the rockers fought, right?
Sure, yeah. I was going to say it's their Jersey City. I don't really know what it is. It's not Jersey City. Jersey City's not a beach town. It's their Asbury Park or their whatever. Their Miami. But we went there and there was some sort of weird error where we checked into the hotel. There's this big, beautiful hotel on the boardwalk, and they basically were like, "Yeah, you weren't. We made some reservation at some online site, and they're like, you weren't supposed to be able to check in here. We're closed for renovations in the season," and they were basically just like, "We're just here for you to check in," and they gave us this room that was like the furthest away room. They're just like, "Yeah, what room do you want?" They're literally all empty, and it was just like a 20-minute walk from the desk to our room, and we were just in a super empty hotel. But when we were checking in, the Carpenters song "We've Only Just Begun" started playing, which is the song from that John Cusack horror movie 1408, where like that in that movie it's like a haunted hotel and the alarm clock keeps going off and playing that song, and we're literally in this hotel where we're the only people there, and basically just like the concierge is like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be here, like if you need anything," and that song is playing, and it was pretty magical and horrifying and great. And I was like, I love this experience so much, and it was very sad because I was like, I'll never be able to recreate this experience. I'll never have this again. I just get to have it right now, and I feel like there were no bikers or radioactive fallout, but in that tiny moment, I sort of understand where you're coming from.
If you stayed 29 more days, like who knows?
Yeah, we did it. Yeah,
stay in a place long enough, you'll see some shit.
Yeah, I think that's true. I want to talk about a specific book, but before we talk about that book, which is your new book, I just wanted to sort of touch on. I think there's an interesting thing because I don't know if I'm supposed to say, but. There's a zine about a pool disaster that has no writer's name on it.
Right, it's by some guy.
But you sell it in your online store.
Yeah, I'm helping him out.
Oh, that's very nice of you. We won't say, we don't know who made it. And then
no, we can talk frankly about it.
Well, you have this pool disaster about your mom's neighbors building a pool in their backyard without knowing how to build a pool. I don't want to talk specifically about that as much as there's the Clown Motel, there's that stuff. And you're obviously you made the Clown Motel book, but also like you're making these zines about them. And they're not mini comics, they're zines in the old fashioned sense of zines where like, when I was coming up and you were coming up, zines were very common and very prevalent. And I think they're a lot rarer these days. Now people have blogs or whatever, but I have a real love for zines, and I love that kind of energy that you bring to this. And then I was thinking about the sort of connective tissue of your zines and your comic work, and like I may be again reading too much into everything, but to me I realized that there's this sort of like mix of like a love letter to a medium and also like an I don't give a fuck about the medium at the same time that is in your comics and in the zine stuff that I think is just this really like, I don't want to say like a punk rock attitude because I don't love when people say that. It doesn't really mean anything, but like there's a real an understanding and a caring about the history of something and the craft of something, and also but also I do whatever the fuck I want to it that I think is really fun. Do you see a connective tissue between the part of you that makes these zines and the comics, or are they just different creative outlets?
Yeah, I don't really like the zines have all been like weird accidents that are mostly Twitter based. Like Pool Disaster was not something I set out to like. It was a pure. I'm trying to remember why I was even at my mom's. I think I had done Heroes. Yeah, that was it. I had done Hero. I had driven from Portland to Charlotte, North. Where did I don't know. I drove across the country.
A great decision.
Yes. Every time I do it, it's a great decision. So on my way back, I stopped at my mom's house. And then, I just like she hates her neighbors, and her neighbors have always been weird. Like every time I go, they're like trash haulers. But like every time I would go back home, they'd have more trampolines in the backyard. Like, so initially they just had one giant trampoline, and then it got up to 3 giant trampolines, and then there were smaller satellite trampolines. Like their yard was just like covered in trampolines.
Did you see them use them ever? Did she?
No, they never used them. She said that occasionally one of their kids, or like, some child would come out of the house, would like walk along the path of trampolines, and then walk back and just bounce right back into the house, and that was it. And then like their dogs would sleep on the trampolines.
Oh wow.
But yeah, it was just like when I happened to be there, they'd cleared all the trampolines out and were trying to build a pool, and I just documented like the first few steps because I knew it was going to be stupid. You could just tell by looking at it. So yeah, and then that just like blew up from there. And then when I left, I told my mom, I taught my mom, I was like, here's how you take a picture on your phone. Like, I was like, here's how ideally, like, and I was like, just text me pictures, send me updates. Because the internet is very interested. And she was like, okay, I get it. I'm amazed she cooperated. But I mean, like, yeah, it was, and then it just like people were just really interested in it. And it was just like a weird, it's one of those stories that just like pops up out of nowhere.
Sure.
And people become invested in, and I became invested in it. So then like, it was more an experiment to see like, will people actually pay for a fucking, a zine about some people they don't know trying to assemble a pool and it going wrong, and it turns out they will. Like, so, and the Clown Motel thing was the reason I did the zine was I got tired of talking about it because that's all anybody wanted to talk about for the like 5 months after I got back and I was like, fuck it, I literally made the zine in 24 hours with like enough time to get it shipped to Emerald City. Like it arrived on the first day of the show. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, the only connective tissue I can really see is like, it's just like things that get stuck in my head, and I want to like turn them into something instead of just like, well, that was a neat experience and then file it away.
I mean, I think that's really beautiful. I really kind of love that. But we should shift gears and now talk about your new book, which is GODFELL, which is coming out from Vault Comics. I don't know when.
February. Yeah, when does it drop?
February.
Okay.
February.
Late February.
Yeah, can you tell us what the book is? What it's about?
Yeah, it's a fantasy book, and it's about this land where one day God falls out of the sky dead, lands in the ground, and then all the many factions of this land, basically are like come to lay claim to it. So our story is about this soldier, Zanzi, who has just gotten away from the war, and she's trying to get back home. And the quickest route for her to get home is to go through the body of God. And she has a companion that she picks up along the way. So it's the two of them entering through the soul of the foot of God and basically working their way up through this gigantic corpse. And then lots of chaotic and weird things happen to them inside.
I love that you told me about this idea a long time ago. I remember we were talking and you were like, yeah, I think I have a fantasy idea. And I was so fascinated by it. And then you started talking and I was like, well, that's not what I expected, and crazy. And to show why we're such different writers, I was sure, because you didn't have a lot of details at the time, that they were going to go in through, the head. And I was like, how does your story end if not coming out God's ass? Like, I don't, and that was just like stuck in my head, was just like, is Chris building a story where we end coming out of God's ass? Like, I don't see any other solution to how this would go. And that's what I was caught up on.
No, right through the tip of his dick.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow.
Either way. they're all interesting ideas to explore. But you went. I mean, I don't know. I haven't read all of it. I don't know where they come out, if they come out. But you didn't start at the head, and so I was impressed with that as an idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got a question about it real quick because I read you mentioned that it was like, oh, you have a fantasy idea. I read in an interview about the book. I believe it was you that you said that fantasy is not a genre you have any particular affinity for before. And so, what was it? What did you have to do in approaching this to sort of like connect with a world like that so that you can build it out and stay interested?
I mean, mostly, I did what I always do. I just tried to build something cool using a lot. It's like I often don't like the result. Like, I like fantasy as a concept. Like, I like all the set pieces.
Yeah.
Like, I've dumped over 100 hours into Skyrim. A lot of that was due to depression, but also I really enjoyed it.
Right.
So, like, I like all the pieces. It just never fits together well for me in a way that, like, it always becomes like, lady whoever is in a bloody battle with Lord whoever. And it becomes like these, like drama of manners shit. And I don't like dragons. I'll say that. Yeah. hot take. I don't like dragons.
Nice. Scalding hot.
Yeah.
What about them?
They're just stupid. Like,
all right. It's an unpopular
like
opinion.
Like, it's just like an
Wow.
edgier Pegasus.
We're gonna have to cut this out. I don't want you to get the hate, the backlash. From that.
Come at me. I'll say it publicly. I'll say it again. Like, I drag anytime a dragon shows up, I'm like, I'm out.
We have a lot of dragons listening.
So I just had to. It was a nice challenge to myself to see if I could write fantasy, just because it's a genre that I'm not super, a huge fan of. Right. But it was a lot of fun to like sort of enmesh myself in something that was much newer to me than like, I know how to write a crime or a sci-fi book. Fantasy, I was just like, oh no. But it let me do, stuff I've always wanted to do, like the omniscient third person narrator. And like, just like anytime I had a contraction, just cross that out, like the full word, like, and just trying to talk like fantasy. Like, I don't know. It was a fun, it was just like a challenge. Some of these books are just like challenges to myself. Like, can I do that? And it turns out I can.
Do you feel like doing this book has made you appreciate fantasy more, or you just don't give a shit?
No, I mean, I think I probably have the same, hopefully the one side effect of doing this book is like people will recommend good fantasy to me. Like, I like urban fantasy, which that feels like a cheat though. Like that doesn't, I don't know. I guess it technically is fantasy. I think I just don't like old timey stuff. Love horses, but I don't like the era where everyone was forced to ride horses.
You like horses optional times.
Yeah. I like horses as a leisure animal, not as a necessity animal.
The thing that I really, I was reading the book and I really love it. I read the first issue and I thought it was amazing. And it was fun to see your voice in a fantasy book and see you doing the third person narration was interesting. And it's fun because I think you have such a good, unique voice for your characters all the time. And watching you do the omniscient narrator is such an interesting twist because it's like, oh, how is this like that? That to me always reads dry. And when you do it, it's not. And so I was like, oh, it's really interesting. But the thing I was sort of caught up in the book, like you have this war and it's, this sort of Cold War. And, like, I don't want to read too much in anything, but it sort of felt like there's kind of a political, like you could find a modern political context for it of this like sort of growing tension between these people and like territorially. And, I think you could look at a lot of different situations and see sort of hints of the context there. And then you follow Zanzi, who is she's just really fucking tired and just wants to go home. And I was like, oh, that's the end of this story. It's not some super noble, principled person. It's not someone who is a true believer. It's just a fucking exhausted person. And I was like, that's such an amazing in to this fantasy world of just like, yeah, there's wars and there's politics and there's principles and there's ideologies, but like at the end of the day, some of us are just exhausted. And like, I love that so much. I guess that's not really a question as much as like going back to the idea of like how you get these big ideas, but then you're coming in from a character first point of view. Like you have this big fantasy concept of God fell out of the sky and how does that change the world? But at the end of the day, it's about a really tired person, and that is the most relatable shit I've ever read.
Yeah, it's very easy to write.
Yeah, I just really, I don't know. I loved reading the book because, you know, like Ethan said, you're coming at it from a place that isn't, and I think this goes back to what I was saying before, that there's a place of like, you have a lot of reverence for the universe you've built. You're not disrespecting your own story, but also it feels like conventions of the genre are not that important to you. Your own rules are what matters. And I think that is really, you know, sort of fearless storytelling that sort of comes through in a really fun way. And I really loved the first issue. Does this make you want to do more stuff outside your comfort zone? Like more? Yeah.
No, I always like, yeah, I'm always like trying to figure out stuff that like, you know, is stuff I I never want to, I don't know. I'm very paranoid about retreading ground that I've already walked over. So I get, you know, like this new thing I've been working on developing, like there was I don't know, there's a pivot point where it can go one or two directions. And like one of them is like, and then, you know, they're like in this caravan and they're on the run. And I was like, but I've done, you know, at least like one or two sort of on the run across the country sort of things. So like, I get very self-conscious about like cribbing from myself.
Sure.
So throwing myself into stuff like fantasy like helps sort of just like remove a lot of that, because like I've never done fantasy before. So like there's this, you know, I could still crib from myself, but like I think the inertia of being in a world that I'm not like very content and familiar with keeps me on my toes and keeps me, you know, sort of pushing a little bit harder to see what I can come up with.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I feel like I don't get so worried about cribbing for myself because I don't think anyone actually reads my books. And then I will reuse jokes and people are like, you used that joke before. And I'll be like, oh, I didn't know you knew that. Okay, sorry. I feel like I'm a like traveling stand-up comic in a different town, but the audience just travels with me. And so I do my act every night and they're like, I've seen this before. And I'm like, oh, it's you again. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's going to be the same tomorrow. So maybe I should be more concerned with it. But I'm not.
I don't think it's a very useful skill to have in your toolbox. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think about it too much.
Do you feel like, I mean, just in terms of creator-owned books, like you're staggeringly prolific. How many creator-owned books have you done? Do you know?
Yeah, I actually just counted. I was rewriting my bio. It's 21. Jeez. Well, with the book, there's a book coming out next year that hasn't been announced, so that'll be 21.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot. Yeah, I would imagine that being concerned about cribbing from yourself becomes harder the more you do, unless you're just radically reinventing everything you do every year, which doesn't seem like a good idea or feasible.
Yeah, I'm not into that. Like, I don't need to rebuild from the ground up. I just need to, like, you know, mark some floors as like off limits.
Obviously, like I wouldn't ask for specifics, but is there anything you can say about what other challenges you're wanting to give yourself?
I'm trying to think. You know, there's a sci-fi outer space book that I'm working on that is very much like a breakup book.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a book about a couple falling out of love with each other and how badly that goes. But the outer space part is very important. But it's very important in terms of setup. But like once the breakup starts happening, it's like that's all I want to talk. Like,
Right.
so I want to do sort of this. Yeah, it's very much just like two people. Sort of jabbing each other for 100 pages. But with a robot, there is a robot. So to break it up a little.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm right now. I mean, like I'm working on a bunch of short stories because that's one I've just gotten out of practice with prose, but there's just some ideas that I don't know. It's always like comics first with me. It's like any idea I come up with, it's like, how is that going to be a comic? Like,
Right.
And I'm trying to sort of like, why don't I throw this in the short story pool and see if I can do it there? Just like, I think comics overall, I'm a little too comfortable with that. So I'm trying to sort of throw myself back on my heels. I also have this weird nonfiction book that I've been working on for 4 years that I've told you about it. It's with all the conspiracy flyers.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So like, I've always got a couple things that like they're the slowest going of all of them because they make me uncomfortable and like because they're challenging. Like it takes me a lot longer, but I always have like 3 or 4 of them slow cooking somewhere in this kitchen.
Well, that's awesome. I'm excited for whenever they come to
Me
read
too.
them. Well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad that you're excited too, Chris. I'd be sad if you were like, I'm not. But,
I'm over it. Yeah,
I'm over it, and I got years to go.
I'm thinking about the 2030s now.
But yeah, I mean, I think that I was excited to have you on because I'm always, I don't say it lightly when I say that you're one of the creators who like I'm kind of most in awe of their ability to create ideas that just in a billion years would never come to me, and so your brain is always one that I'm sort of fascinated by, and I hope that if you die before I do, you'll leave it to me and I can explore it and play with it.
Yeah,
you don't have to answer on the air.
No, I didn't have plans for it, so if you want it. You got to take my dog too.
Well, your dog kind of hates me, so that's good.
No. My dog just wants to consume you. That's
that's
the ultimate form of love. Ask anyone in Devore. Like,
this is true, I guess. For those who don't know, Chris's wonderful dog Zola. Many times I've stayed there, and she just chews on me like a chew toy. And then I came over with Tyler Boss to hang out, and before it, I warned him. I was like, Zola's a very big, very strong dog who just chews on people. And Zola sweetly nuzzled up next to him, gave him a sweet kiss on his cheek, and then lay down so he could pet her. And then I was like, what the hell? Why isn't she eating him? And as soon as I said that, she leapt up and just like started chomping on me. So we have a strange relationship.
You have a certain musk.
I do. I mean, I don't like to talk about it on air, but I'm definitely musky. I mean, we're just going to get into that. I think that brings us to a good end when we start talking about my musk. I think that's the point when I end.
No, that's when the episode should start.
I think so.
This is the pre-show, and now we're going to get into it. No, but I was really excited to have you come on and get to chat and see your lovely face. And I was really excited to read GODFELL. It's so good, and I can't urge people enough to go read it and explore it and all of Chris's stuff because he is one of the best in the business by miles. And
you're very sweet to say so.
So yeah, Chris, thanks for coming and hanging out with us today. And it was a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our discussion with Christopher Sebela. Make sure to check out GODFELL as well as everything else Chris is working on by giving him a follow on Twitter @XTOP. To get the latest episodes of this podcast, as well as news, giveaways, and even comics delivered straight to your inbox, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week with another wonderful guest. And in the meantime, you can write to us at ideasdon'tbleedpod@gmail.com or tweet to Matthew Rosenberg at ashcanpress on Twitter, me at Tales to Astonish, or Griffin at Griff Sheridan. We'll include some of your correspondence on the show, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And big thanks to Summer People for our theme song, Where's the Poison? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.